All right, the recording is on. Marius, feel free to start with your presentation.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Marius, and together with my colleagues Quentin and Florian, I will be presenting an introduction to the Adobe Managed CDN for AEM Cloud Service. I think this is our first gem session on the topic. So we will do first a general introduction into the managed CDN for AEM, and then present how you can configure it, and then deep dive on some more specific topics on configuration like redirects and traffic protection. And at the end, we will also have a short demo to show you how to deploy these configurations. So first, let me start with a little bit of context. We are part of the content delivery team for AEM as a cloud service. We are dealing mostly with CDN management. The CDN was introduced for AEM Cloud Service since GA, and roughly speaking, the problems that we are dealing is the modifying the requests coming in and the responses going out, routing them to appropriate origins and caching. I would start first by asking what is a CDN useful for. So typically the CDNs were used as also as a storage, so you could put your binaries in a CDN, but now the functionality is going more towards a reverse proxy. So it's not necessarily about putting binaries in the CDN. You typically have a reverse proxy, and one of the most important features of the CDN, it's actually a crucial functional feature right now, is to host your custom domains and certificates. So this is needed to actually go live with your site. It is important to host these certificates and custom domains in a CDN, because the TLS handshake for establishing a secure connection is very influenced by the distance between the browser and the server. So it's a lot faster if the servers are closer to the actual clients. It's a couple of hundreds of milliseconds faster. So it's always good to have the certificates deployed as near to the actual client. But also another important feature for performance is caching. So delivering an HTTP response from cache, it's actually under 10 milliseconds, while fetching it from the origin, if it's not cached and you need to compute it, typically it takes hundreds of milliseconds. All these functionalities can be configured in a CDN, and we actually introduced a lot more configurability options in the out-of-the-box CDN for AEM Cloud Service. But let me first mention that while we have an out-of-the-box Adobe Managed CDN for all AEM Cloud Service environments, you can also do all this customization in your own CDN. So the bring your own CDN pattern is supported, but for cloud service environments, even if you have your own CDN, as it's shown here in the first diagram, the request will still go through the Adobe Managed CDN and then to the AEM origin, which is formed from the dispatcher and the AEM. For edge delivery sites, if you have your own CDN, you can go directly to AEM Live. It's not necessarily that you go through the Adobe Managed CDN. Even if, strictly speaking, the AEM Live is also implemented at the edge in a CDN. Okay, but of course, if you don't have your own CDN, or you don't want to use one, you don't want to pay for an extra CDN, you can use the Adobe Managed CDN. And this is provided for out of the box for every cloud service environment. And it sits between the browser and the dispatcher. But also recently it is provided also for edge delivery sites. So you can have an Adobe Managed CDN in front of an edge delivery site, in front of your AEM Live domain, and you can configure custom domains and certificates there. So you can go live with an edge delivery site entirely using the Adobe offering. Just to recap, until now, the Adobe Managed CDN is always present for cloud service environments, but for edge delivery services is optional if you have your own CDN. And the main features of the CDN are managing domains and certificates. You can do this for both of these flavors, for CS environments and for EDS sites, and also customizing the requests, responses, and this is possible currently for cloud service environments, and soon it will be available also for edge delivery, Adobe Managed CDN for edge delivery. Now I will go a little bit in detail on the customization options for the CDN, for the Adobe Managed CDN. We are calling this the CDN configuration, and typically it means functionality for transforming the HTTP requests and responses. So we got a lot of feedback during the past years that out-of-the-box CDN for cloud service is not customizable. And in the last year, we introduced a lot of functionality to allow you to modify headers directly at the CDN, rewrite paths, block traffic, redirect 301, 302 redirects, and a very requested feature was to proxy to external origins. If you have a third-party system that you want to integrate with in your custom domain. So, of course, you could do all this header manipulation, proxying, with the existing stack of cloud service, because in the end, AEM has an HTTP server, dispatcher is in itself based on Apache and is an HTTP server. So you could modify all this in the AEM, in an AEM servlet filter, or with dispatcher directives. But it is very advantageous to do the modifications as soon as possible when the request comes into the infrastructure. For security reasons, if you want to block some requests, it's good to do it in the outermost layer. But also if you want to do rewrites of paths and normalizing the query parameters and so on, it's good to do it as soon as the request enters the infrastructure, so that all your layers of infrastructure see the same thing afterwards. So and of course the manipulating request in AEM and dispatcher will not work with edge delivery services, which don't have AEM nor dispatcher. So this way of writing CDN configurations, it's compatible also with edge delivery services. So we introduced a new type of pipeline in Cloud Manager. It's called a targeted deployment pipeline of type configuration. In short, we call it a configuration pipeline, which consists of essentially of a YAML file. So you can define a pipeline to deploy a YAML file to the CDN. So you can see the structure. You just need in your repo a folder /config with a cdn.yaml file, and the cdn.yaml should look something like you see below. There are several sections like request transformations, traffic filters, authentication or redirects, origin selectors, and response transformations. I will go through all of these next. But first, let me tell you a little bit how they are executed. So each of these phase is executed in an order. The browser makes a request to the CDN, and then the first ones that are executed are the request transformations. Here you can manipulate the request, add, remove headers. It's the exact request that comes from the browser, so unaltered by any of our logic. And then after you clean up the request, you can allow or disallow traffic based on different rules. This is the WAF part, or the web protection part. Quentin will talk more about this in this presentation. And then you can check the visitor's credentials in the authentication phase, ask if the request should be redirected, and then in the end select the origin where you would want to send this request. So this happens all before, after all these phases, you have chosen an origin, and then the cache is inspected if the response already exists in the cache. If it's not in the cache, the request goes to the origin, the AEM origin or an external one, and then the response comes back, and you have the last chance of interacting with the response in a response transformation. So all these phases right now are configurable and offer a pretty high degree of liberty to the customers. I will talk now a little bit about the structure of these CDN rules. As I said before, these are some YAML document, and a rule has typically a name, a condition, and an action. The name is just for debugging. The condition says when the rule should apply, and the action, what the rule should do. The conditions are typically general in all phases. You can write conditions based on request path, URL, method, query string, things like that, or client IP, client country. So in all phases, you can write these conditions using these request properties. And you can have predicates like using regular expressions or exact match and so on. And then the actions are typically specific to each phase. In the request transformations, you can set unset headers. In traffic filters, you'll see you can block, allow requests. So these are typically specific for each high-level section. You can also have variables. I am naming them here just to have it in mind, where you can pass state between phases, from request transformations to traffic filters. Okay, so next I will go just through a couple of these phases. The first one, as I said, the first one that is executed is the request transformation. Request transformations are very useful to normalize your URLs and to sanitize them and sanitize the request. What does it mean to normalize the URL? So if you have abnormal URLs, or for example, your site serves only pages without HTML extension, you would want to strip the .html so that you both request with HTML and without will hit the same cache key. Because the URL is part of the cache key. So typically it's very good to for also remove query parameters that are not needed, again, to maximize the cache hits. You can also sanitize request headers, like removing authorization header if your site does not need authorization, just to prevent any hacks or unexpected behavior. So in general, use the request transformations to minimize your URL space, avoid cache busting attacks, and maximize the cache hit ratio. Here is the first time you'd see how a rule looks like. This one is a request transformation that has a condition, a when condition, and it matches if the domain is www.example.com and the path is search, and the action is to unset all the query parameters that are not matching search ID. So essentially you only allow one query parameter to your application, removing all the others. The second rule is unsetting a request header. So, as I said, these kind of conditions can be used in all rules, but I will not go through all of these. Some of these will be covered by my colleagues. But from the previous diagram, you saw that the request then flows through traffic filters, authentication, redirects, and we also have some handlers for error pages. I will just mention here the authentication use case, where we have currently 3 types of authentication supported. One is edge key or authentication. This is to integrate your custom CDN, if you have one, with the Adobe Managed CDN. So only your custom CDN can connect to the Adobe Managed CDN. I wanted to show here that you can use secrets in these YAML files. You can reference them, secrets that have been previously deployed as environment variables for your environments. This is the syntax, $, curly brace, and then the name of the secret. You can also set up purge key, and also we have implemented the basic authentication that is supposed to be used only for previewing content or before going live is, I mean, basic auth is not considered a fully fledged authentication mechanism, so we should not replace the normal authentication that you are using. We are now investigating to build integration with identity providers using OpenID Connect. So if you are interested in this, please contact us and we can work in an early adopter program to understand your use case. Okay, so now the next feature I would go through is the origin selectors. This was a very highly requested feature to proxy requests to different origins. There are some properties here, but I think I have to rush a little bit through the presentation. What's important is that you can define an external origin, and then you can select it for different paths of your application. Here is a diagram that shows how this will look like for proxying some of the requests to AEM Cloud Service environments with dispatcher and AEM, but other requests to AEM Live. And the definition of such a rule would look like this. So the section is origin selectors. You'll have to define an origin with a name and a domain, and then for the selected paths, so if the path matches scripts, styles, fonts, you just say the action should be select origin and the name of the origin. So this way you can proxy to whatever external origin you have, including edge delivery sites. Response transformations are the last thing that are executed. You can modify response headers and status, and they are very useful if you want to set also response headers for blobs, because that's a tricky part in the in AEM Cloud Service. I had here a diagram how the blobs are served, but I will just leave the diagram and mention that if you want to set up custom headers on blob response, you should use response transformations. So with that, I conclude my introduction, and I will hand it over to Quentin to speak about redirects and traffic filters.
So thank you, Marius. Yeah, I think you will have to release the screen so I can share it. Sorry for that. Okay, thank you, Marius. So now let's jump into the topic of traffic redirect. So here I'm talking about client-side redirect, so the 301, 302 redirects. So as you might already know, usually in AEM as a cloud service, dispatcher is a right place to handle this kind of redirect, mainly because dispatcher can handle redirects ranging from a few to 10,000 of redirects. So usually you will use module write, Apache module, in order to handle your client redirects. It will be directly part of your AEM project code, which means you will be able to deploy your redirect through the web tier pipeline or the full stack pipeline. But a few weeks ago, we actually released a new way of handling client redirect in dispatcher using a pipeline-free URL redirects approach that leverages the ACS command redirect map manager and gives the ability to your marketing and content team to actually manage redirect directly from UI. So it means there is no need for using Git, and there is also no need to execute any pipelines. So it's quite nice. We actually wanted to mention also that while redirects are still like handled at dispatcher, they can still be cached at CDN, which is quite important if you set the proper cache control headers directly from your dispatcher configuration. But last year, we also introduced a new CDN capabilities for you to also handle client redirects directly at the CDN, but it comes with some limitation, especially around the size of the CDN configuration that you can deploy, which is limited to around 100 kilobytes. So it means you won't be able to basically deploy thousands of redirects at the CDN. So you should keep the usage for like really simple use cases, such as redirecting your Apex domain to www domain. And here we have an example. As you can see, it's quite easy to use. You can also use client redirects feature to redirects to canonical URL, so meaning by stripping the HTML extension from the request URL. And another quite useful use case that you can do at the CDN is to redirect your visitor to a country-specific page based on the geolocation of the client IP. So now let's dive into another topic, which is traffic protection. So CDN traffic filter rules was one of the many new features we introduced last year. So traffic filter rules enabled you to block, log, and allow traffic based on patterns directly at the CDN. So it means you can leverage those kind of rules to, for example, block IPs or block a specific set of countries, or even log any logging attempt on your website. Of course, you can also leverage traffic filter rules to block even more advanced patterns. For example, you can leverage the regex operation in the CDN rules to look for SQL keyword part of the query string in order to identify potential SQL injection. The same way, you can also inspect the request path with regex in order to find a potential traversal path attack. And the last example will be to leverage traffic filter rules to block a specific extension, such as PHP, which is quite useful here because AEM, first of all, is not doing any business with PHP. And PHP is also a common target of vulnerability scanners, so you might want to block it. So you can use CDN traffic filter rules to even implement your own simple WAF, but you will have to be aware of a few limitations. First of all, following like a regex approach to block traffic is really time consuming because you really have to take a lot of time to nail the regex, but also to look at your traffic to see if there is any attacker that might find a way to bypass your regex. And there are also some technical limitations, not necessarily introduced by the CDN rules, but more by the underlying script language the rules gets compiled to, which is VCL. For instance, a VCL doesn't let you, doesn't provide a way for you to iterate through request headers. So it means if you would want to inspect your request for an XSS exploit, you will have to explicitly list every request header to analyze. So it's not really scalable. Another big limitation is the fact that VCL doesn't let you inspect the body of a request. So same here, if you would want to look for an XSS exploit sent via a form, unfortunately, you won't be able to do it with VCL, neither with CDN traffic filter rules. But for customers that requires like a more advanced security feature directly at the edge, Adobe also has a product called the AEM WAF that is running directly at the CDN, and that will offer you more advanced protection against OWASP top 10, so SQL injection, XSS, as well as protection against anomaly by being able to identify traffic coming from scanners or traffic towards known private files such as environment file, password file, etc. And it will also be able to detect traffic coming from known bad actors. So known malicious IPs, known malicious bots, etc. So the AEM WAF is a self-serve product that requires a separate license. It comes directly with a pre-configured set of rules that you can directly enable or disable via the traffic filter rules. So how does it look like in practice? Here we have an example, as you can see, of a traffic filter rules that you can use to block OWASP's top 10 vulnerabilities on your website. So it's as simple as defining a condition when star, which means you want to always block traffic when the traffic is actually flagged as being like an SQL injection or an XSS or traversal path attack, etc. So as you can see here, there is no more regexes. Basically, the overall logic to inspect requests for malicious payload is directly handled into the WAF, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. And it's also more robust because the WAF will be able to inspect the entire request, so both the headers and the body. So it's a huge gain of time, and it's also far more robust. So now that you know about the tools to best protect your website, you might wonder, how can I know that I'm even getting attacked? And so for that, Adobe provides tools in several variants that you can use in order to analyze your CDN traffic. So the first variant is an Elasticsearch Kibana stack that you can install locally on your laptop. You can download your CDN logs from Cloud Manager, ingest them, and then you will have access to the following dashboard. The second variant is for customers that are leveraging the log forwarding feature to forward their CDN logs to their own Splunk instance. So for them, we also provide a Splunk dashboard that they can install directly in their own Splunk instance. And they will have access to exactly the same level of information. So we provide two dashboards. One is really focused on CDN traffic analysis. It's the following dashboard, where you will get insight on your traffic. So you will be able to see top IPs, top URLs, top user agent, top countries, as well as the distribution of traffic over time. And if you have a WAF license, you will also be able to see WAF insights from that dashboard. So you will be able to tell what kind of vulnerabilities attackers are trying to exploit on your website. So it should give you enough information and enough insights for you to come up with the right CDN traffic filter rules. The second dashboard is more focused on your website performance in terms of cache hit ratio and cache coverage. So it will help you identify potential resources that are not cached at CDN and that you might want to look into and implement proper dispatcher configurations to improve the cache hit ratio and therefore the performance of your website. So now that you know about the tools and how you can analyze your CDN traffic, let's dive into a specific kind of attacks, DDoS attacks. So nowadays, unfortunately, any website can be the target of a DDoS attack. And so that's why Adobe provides some out-of-the-box protections in order to mitigate DDoS attack on your website. Some of the protections are directly coming from Fastly or CDN provider that will protect you at the TCP IP level. And on top of that, Adobe has its own DDoS protection at HTTP level that are mainly relying on the rate limiter. So it means any AEM as a cloud service environment has its own rate limiter configured directly by Adobe that aims to protect you against really volumetric attacks. And here I'm talking about millions of requests per minute. So if those protections ever kicked in, you will receive directly an Action Center notification to let you know that your website is under attack, but Adobe is taking the proper actions to mitigate the attack by blocking the malicious traffic. If that ever happened to you, we highly recommend you to download your CDN logs and use the dashboard we just showed you in order to better understand the scale of the attack and maybe find a couple of patterns that you might want to block using CDN traffic filter rules. And so one way to protect your website against DDoS attack using CDN traffic filter rules is to actually leverage the rate limiter feature. So how it looks like, it's actually quite simple to set up. So it's directly part of the CDN traffic filter rules. You can define a rate limit node. And by the way, here we have an example how you can limit the number of requests per IP. So the rate limit node is composed of several properties. The first one goes together, so the limit and window. It basically describes the average number of requests per second on the time window for which the rate limiter should kick in. So in that specific example, we want to start blocking an IP if it makes in average more than 100 requests per second on a 10-second time window. The next property is penalty, defined in seconds. So it's the number of seconds for which the IP will get blocked if it go over the threshold. Then we have the group by, which here is set to request property client IP. It basically tells the rate limiter how to aggregate the data. So basically here we want to block per IP, but if you want, you could block per user agent, or per path. And of course, you can also combine multiple properties. So if you want a rate limiter to block per client IP and path, you can also do it. The only information here, which is quite important, is that the rate limiter is deployed at POP level in Fastly. And the final property is count. So we offer three kinds of rate limiters that will count different things. So the first one is count all. So it will basically count every incoming request at the CDN. The second one is fetches, which will count only requests that goes to origin, meaning a request that cannot be served from cache, so misses and passes. And the final one will count only errors. So, and by errors, I mean client-side and server-side errors. So we highly recommend you to use the free variant because they will basically protect you from three different things. For example, the count all will more protect your content request budget. So if you want to avoid an IP to make too many content requests on your website that might impact your budget, it's the right rate limiter to implement. The second one, fetches, is more to avoid any or to mitigate any potential outage on your origin, so by blocking IPs that are making too many requests that bypass the CDN cache. And the third one will only count errors, as I said, and it's quite useful to block either IPs that are client IPs that are making too many requests that goes to your origin and that start overwhelming like the origin, and so it might be like a early side of an outage. So you might want to block that IP, but it's also quite helpful to block scanners. So scanners that are trying to access some random path of your website, and that will generate a lot of load on your origin, and like mostly all requests will anyway end up in 4.4. So you might want also to block this IP as soon as possible. This example also introduced another feature called CDN traffic filter rules alert. So basically by setting the alert field under action, set it to true, you will be able to receive an action center notification once your traffic filter rules get triggered. So it's quite helpful to be aware that your website is under attack. Okay, so a question we often get asked is what should be the limit for my rate limiter? And it's a tricky question, and to be frank with you, we don't really have the answer because it depends so much on your website and on your expectation. But one thing we recommend you to do is to actually look at the dashboard we already mentioned, because they contain some information such as the maximum number of requests per second and per IP, both at the CDN and at the origin. And so if you use those graphs, you will be able to get a quite accurate value of what is the limit as of today. And I would recommend you to start from those values, basically. So we also wanted to take that opportunity to share a couple of tips with you to better protect your website against potential DDoS attacks. And so the first tip is to always ensure fast responses from origins. So try to avoid having response that takes, I don't know, 30 seconds or 60 seconds to generate, because it can be seen as a vulnerability from the point of view of an attacker. Basically, the attacker will have to send a really low amount of requests toward that endpoint, and it might already overwhelm your origin and create an outage. So try to avoid that. The second tip is to always leverage good caching, simply because the CDN can scale much better than your origin. So if you can serve a DDoS attack directly from the CDN cache, it means no outage because your origin won't receive that much traffic. And so one good way to actually leverage good caching is to remove unknown query parameters, simply to avoid cache busting attacks, so where attackers would send a lot of requests that will bypass the CDN cache by injecting some random query parameters. The next tips is to use a dashboard, because as I mentioned, you will find really valuable insights such as an accurate value for your rate limiter. Next, try to use different strategies. So as I said, we have, for example, several rate limiters that you can combine to protect you from different things. But you can also combine the same rate limiter for different purposes. So for example, if your website is only doing business in a country, such as Switzerland, you might want to have two rate limiters, one that will basically count only requests coming from client IP based in Switzerland, and a second rate limiter with a much strict limit that count requests coming from client IP outside of Switzerland. Next, don't forget to set up an alert in order to get notified when your site is under attack. It's the best way to know about it. Otherwise, you might end up with an outage, which is not really nice. And finally, more like a development tip. So CDN traffic filter rules are quite powerful. So you want to ensure that you test them well. And so for that, I will recommend to always start with action log, deploy your rule, test it, and if it works as you expect, then you can turn it on to block. So with that, I will hand over to Florian for a quick demo.
Thank you, Quentin. So for the demo, what I've done, I have like a normal regular RDE environment that is set up. It's the weekend example site that you know from many other AEM demos already. Currently, there are no CDN rules configured here, but what we actually want to do is we want to deploy a couple of traffic filter rules that Quentin has also mentioned before, and redirects as well, that will offer like a redirect at CDN level. So what we want to do here is we want to block a path, because it's easier for the sake of this demo to block a path rather than IPs or specific countries here. But you can block on many different request properties, as mentioned before already. So on this RDE environment, let's check the status of this one. Okay, great. This is a regular RDE environment, so let's actually then use the new RDE deployment type environment config to deploy this configuration. So this is a regular deployment type, similar to what you might know already from the RDE, how to deploy dispatcher configuration, for example. This one is using a similar mechanism that you know from the configuration pipeline from Cloud Manager from the regular dev, stage, and production environments. Except this one is uploading the zip configuration immediately, and you don't have to upload anything to your Cloud Manager Git installation initially. So the first one actually fails because we have a typo in the configuration. This one I did in order to show you also like the reaction time and the response time on how quick you can actually develop with this RDE mechanism, and how quick you can get actually some feedback on if your configuration has typos or syntax errors. So now, once we fixed this typo here, this configuration will be uploaded. And another kind of a use case, for example, that you would have for the redirect, as Quentin already mentioned, you would configure here redirects, for example, for your Apex domain to the www, or also especially for country-specific domains. For example, if you're coming from the US, you want to have your customers forwarded to the US English website, if they're coming from Spain or Germany, to the respective other country websites. As you see here, the configuration has already been deployed to this one, to the CDN. But this does not necessarily mean that it's already available, because this means that the configuration has been deployed to Fastly, but Fastly has a global system, and Fastly needs to themselves, they need to deploy it to their multiple different POPs. So this might take a couple of minutes sometimes. So as we see here, now the adventures page is blocked, as basically expected here. And we can also test out the redirect that we had configured in the About page here. And this one redirects us to the English US About page. So now let's try out a different scenario that we want to see. We don't want to have this traffic filter rule anymore. We don't want to block it. But instead of blocking, we want to have authentication, and we want to use some simple basic auth to protect our website from the public traffic, but so that we can use it as well. And we also want to try out the origin selector features that proxies traffic from the path, everything that is under /example. We want to proxy to example.com domain. This might be some API of yours, etc. As Marius mentioned, you can also define API keys, etc. if you have a protected endpoint there. So let's deploy this one here. I will just leave it here and show you actually what's going on here when it's deploying. And if you have any questions, please continue asking in the question and answers. Continue answering in posting your questions in the Q&A section of the gem session. Example here, this will be the page where it will be available soon. So this is a 404 still, as we see here. Now this one completed, so it takes roughly like a minute for the configuration to be installed in the CDN, and then a couple of more seconds to minutes until we can see it here. And here we can see the example.com domain is now available under example. And when we now go actually on the adventures page in a new tab here, then we see also this page is now protected by basic auth. So we can actually see, I think I forgot to show you this one here. So the way you define it here is you define a credential. The user is John, for example, and the password is, Marius already mentioned, you can define secrets here. So this is an environment variable that is defined in Cloud Manager. And yeah, as you can see here, this is normally reachable now again, the site. The environment variables are defined in Cloud Manager here in the configuration. One important detail to mention, you have to actually select the type secret, and also you have to select the service all, so that it's not specifically for the service author or publish, but that it's for all, and that way it will be also deployed to the CDN. That's it from the demo site here. If you have any feedback to this session, or also you have questions about the new CDN features that were presented, or you have other CDN use cases that you want to discuss with us that you think might not be possible currently with the CDN configuration, please reach out to us. We're also looking into writing more advanced business logic directly at the CDN using Edge Compute and JavaScript. So if you have any interest or use cases, please reach out on the email that is noted here, or you can also reach out in the Q&A chat, and Brian will be happy to be in contact with you. Goran, should we do some Q&A at the end?
Yeah, Great. Thanks a lot for your presentation and demo. Before we go into the Q&A, I would quickly like to ask you to complete a concluding poll. I will post in the general chat. And then we're gonna switch to Q&A. In the concluding poll, there's a question about Adobe Managed CDN, and you can rate this session and also post requests for future sessions, what kind of topics you're interested in and looking forward to have in an AEM Gem session. All right, let's look at the questions that haven't been answered already. Also, thanks to the team for answering this many questions again. All right, good amount of information is available in this Q&A. Is it possible to? Okay, we will post the Q&A along with the slides and the recording on the contextual thread. You will find the link to the contextual thread in the general chat. We will post this information about 1 or 2 days after the session. Next question is, will it deploy the CDN changes to AEM Author CDN as well as or only Publish CDN? This has just been answered by Marius, I see. In the interest of...
Yes, I can repeat it. So because it's a general good practice and I didn't mention it, the CDN YAML applies to the whole environment. So if you block traffic and you write a condition that is always true, it will block traffic to author, publish, or preview. So it's always good to guard your rules with a condition that, for example, request property tier equals publish. This will apply only to publish, or even better, to request property domain equals your specific domain that you want to apply the rules for. So, yeah.
Thank you, Marius. The next question is about if we share the deck. Yes, we will post the slides along with the recording and the Q&A 1 or 2 days post-session into the contextual thread. All right, let me find the questions we haven't answered. How can we increase the number of connections if you are using advanced networking?
Advanced networking is for egress traffic, so traffic going from AEM towards other services. So it doesn't go through the CDN. So I don't think it's related to the CDN.
Okay. Otherwise, please specify. Question on traffic rule. If we are blocking a request based on IP range and tier as publish, does this block custom domains request, customer setup domain, which will internally get data from publish pardon, as well? Or does it only block when users try to access publish instance directly? This is needed to block direct publish instance from external traffic.
So, yeah, go ahead, Quentin.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of similar question as just Marius answered. So actually, you can leverage the CDN rules conditions to really apply your rule for, yes, really specific conditions. So here, if I read it correctly, you might need a condition with that apply for published tier when the IP is in the IP ranges that you want to block. And the last conditions will be the domain. So you can also apply rules on domains if you want. So if your domains is example.com, etc. So yeah, I think those 3 conditions put together should address your use case without blocking the custom domains.
Thank you, Quentin. Next question, does rate limiting require WAF license?
No, it's part of the CDN rules, and so it's available for any AEM AEM as a cloud service customer.
All right, thank you. Utilizing Sling Dynamic include in AEM setup to handle edge side includes for dynamic content delivery with ESI included. Is it possible to read the query parameters of the parent URL or append the parent URL query parameters to ESI include URL?
Oh, I don't think so. So ESI support is pretty limited. It only has includes and I think that's basically it. So you cannot manipulate the query string, pass it. I will have to read the question more, but I would say in general, the support is pretty basic, only for the standard include.
Yeah, we can follow up post session when we post the Q&A to the contextual thread. There we will specify. We're at the top of the hour. I want to take one last question. In case of custom CDN, will 2 CDNs not cause performance issues?
We haven't seen any. It's mostly, I would say that typically the CDNs are distributed basically in the same regions, all the CDN providers, and the latency between their servers is very low. So we have a lot of customers using the bring your own CDN pattern, and there is no latency problem.
Okay, great. Thanks for answering all the questions, and thanks to the audience for all your questions. That is important, so we know what are your challenges and where we can improve. I will post the contextual thread link again, so you will be able to check on the recording once live in 1 or 2 days post session. Then I also want to thank you for your attention and for joining. And please stay tuned for any upcoming AEM GEMs and join me there in the upcoming webinars. Thank you very much, and all have a great day or evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.